But I've looked at that before, and I must say the Cohen-Gooch analysis probably permeates my way of thinking about military misfortune and military failure. But to get beyond those broad generalizations and to not supplant, but to supplement them with a set of generalizations of my own. Generally, I've looked at 1914 from the Russian, and this is just for starters, and I've looked at what I call a trinity of failures that affected the Russians. Essentially, I see, first of all, a failure in collaboration, and I'll talk more about these in detail, a failure in command, and a failure in the method of war planning. And all of these are multi-layered, and all of them interact with one another to add up to the ingredients for the larger military failure in the field in August and early September 1914. And I must say that before I get on into an excursion of these, that not all of August and September 1914 was a failure. In the public eye, if you are familiar with Barbara Tuchman in her Guns of August, and if you looked at Solzhenitsyn's August 1914, they tend to fixate on the most spectacular catastrophe, and that was essentially in 1914 there were two parallel offensive operations going on the Eastern Front. One was into East Prussia against the Germans, and this is the one that ended up with the spectacular failure at Tannenberg at the end of August New Style, 1914, where you had major elements, three whole corps of one Russian field army virtually surrounded and taken prisoner or wiped out. And then at the same time, though, you had a parallel offensive going in against Austria-Hungary into Galicia. And there, after about 2 weeks of a lot of trying moments and a lot of losses, the Russians managed to produce, rather than the failure up here, a partial success. And that's really eclipsed by what went on up here. You know, this is the one that everybody remembers. Nobody remembers this. In fact, nobody has even done that much research on it. When I was doing research on it to write up this blasted thing, I had to go back to Golovin. I had to go back to all kinds of odd stuff in the military reading room in Moscow and so on to get the materials that I needed for that. And so what happened was two parallel offensive. One ends up with a spectacular catastrophe, and the other with only partial success. How do you explain that? And then I come over here, because essentially what I see is that if you get to a discussion of the evolution of war plans and strategy, what you will see increasingly since the time of Napoleon is that the era of the solitary great captain working out all of his strategic and operational arrangements and so on is long past. And the reason for it is that even by 1914, the preparation and the means for waging modern war are so complex that they really escape the genius of a single great captain like Napoleon and so on and so forth. It's important to have folks like that around, but the very scale and the myriad of detail involved with preparation and planning tends to escape the individual, and for that reason you see the appearance of individuals that deal, or of institutions that deal with it in the form of the General Staff, which is, you know, as Shapashnikov put it, the brain of the Army. The General Staff is a collective institution that supplements, replaces in some cases, the brain of the individual. And what I would say is that for this to operate well, it really relies on collaboration at various levels, not only in a political military sense, but also among the military themselves, and also between the military and select civilian organizations. For example, I don't want to get into the complexities of troop mobilization in Russia, but suffice it to say, here's part of the complexity of the problem. In peacetime in 1914, the Russian army is 1.2 million. The great majority of these folks are first-term conscripts who are serving out their initial 3 years of service. And when, under conditions of mobilization for war, that organization, that fundamental military organization unfolds with troop mobilization to number about 4.7 million in the field. And in order to manage this process with all the organizational transit, training, deployment requirements and everything else, it's simply beyond the span of a single individual. You need a whole bunch of folks to assist you in planning for that.